Hello, welcome back to Walkabout. In today's episode, I continue working on my authentication improvements. I'm going to rebuild my existing login sequence in SwiftUI. In the previous episode, we saw how I took all the business logic out of my UIKit view controllers and put it into an authentication manager. Today, we're going to use that authentication manager in my SwiftUI views so that actually my UIKit and SwiftUI, because I still keep my UIKit implementation for all the iOS versions, can both reuse the same business logic in my authentication manager. Let's go and have a look at it. Now what you see here is actually the same screen as you saw before, but it's built in SwiftUI. And what I do? Here in my authentication manager, I have a show login. And that show login is when there's no user here, no authentication, no user. I need to show the login, my startup screen. And this screen now has an exception if there's iOS 14, because that's my threshold for using SwiftUI or not. I go and use my root view startup view as a view controller. Now I still need to have the hybrid solution with UIKit. Eventually that will all disappear, but for now this is the way it is. And if it's not iOS 14, then of course I use my existing startup view controller that I built ages ago, and that in the previous episode you saw that I converted to use the same authentication manager. Now, let's go and have a look at the startup view. The startup view here is a very simple view. I need to do a little bit of work to make sure that my navbar is white and that it doesn't show up. There is still, I think, some work to do by the Apple team to make navigation and navbars a little bit easier in SwiftUI. But for now, I work around with it by just setting a few global, let's say, configuration options to change the appearance. Now, I need my show and terms, like here, my terms, and I already had those windows to use, to build in SwiftUI because I already did my settings and they use there. And a normal AV stack with the controls in here. A spacer on top, an image, a navigation link for the register button, some text, the button to show the term toggle and show this in the sheet. Now, the same here for the privacy, and then an account sign in goes to my login view. And here you can see in the login view, passes in the view model, my login view model, and the same as I did here for my register view with the register view model. Now, the startup view is so simple that I don't need a view model, but the other ones, there's some more business logic involved for registration and logging in, and yes, I use a view model to do that. So most of the cases, I have a one-on-one relationship between a view and a view model, as you have seen in previous episodes, and if you have not, now you know. Now, this screen is not that important as a preview, and that's it. So let's go to the login view, because that is the example that I will use today for how I constructed everything. And that login view has an observable object with my view model, my login view model. It builds the view here. Now let's go to that view so we can see it. It sets a logo, it sets some text to sign in, a text field, a secure text field with some configuration options, a stack here for my forgotten password that I need to link to, and then the button to sign in. And you see this button has a couple of attributes. In action, it goes to the view model sign in, so business logic in the view model. And it will say if it's not valid, it will be disabled. So we cannot log in. And I still have a little bit of an issue because actually I click it now, it's disabled. The text should have a little bit of a different color, I know, so it's not obvious that it's disabled, but I need to improve on this button. But maybe I will postpone that until I can say I can go into iOS 15 when the buttons are greatly improved. But for now, it's about the business logic. It's not about this detail little user interface thing. Now let's have a look at the view model that I have here for my login. I have a view model. And this view model, let's start. It has a published email and password because I need to type something that I need to bind. Every time when it changes here, I need to check for the passwords, whether it's valid. And it's when it's empty and the password must be at least 6, I say it's valid. And then here in the login view on the button we say we sign in, what is another important part. We get to this sign in button, we check if it's not valid, we set the message and we show the message. And this is where the implementation in UIKit is different than the implementation in SwiftUI, because in UIKit we have this check in the view controller and we throw this alert immediately. But here, of course, we need to do that in the view. So if we look carefully here in the view, we have an alert and it's presented if there's a show message. Yeah? And when the show message is true, it will actually show in an alert the message. That means that in the login view model, if it's not valid, we set the message, cannot be empty, and we set the show message is true. And of course, we stop then execution, because this is how it works. If you set from the view model these variables, the view will re-render itself and will show here the alert. Now, if this is all is not relevant, then we get into the authentication manager. We use the sign in, what is exactly the same as you saw in the previous episode I did from the UIKit implementation. And when we're here getting into the on complete, we get a user and a message. If there's a message, we need to show it. We stop. If there's a user, we check if it's a user, and then we dismiss it, because this is how it currently works. We dismiss the screen, and then the handle authentication change will then get fired, because we actually authenticated something, a new event, and it will navigate to the correct screen. And this is not very different than we did in UIKit. We also dismissed the pop of the view, and then that handler will do exactly the same, and we mimic that. Now, in a 100% SwiftUI implementation, I'll probably implement it a little bit different, but this is the way I need to use it in order to migrate slowly and have this hybrid scenario. Now, if you're interested in the registration view, it's exactly the same. It just has an extra field, and of course it does the same, and it has a register view model that of course has this extra name field. It uses an isValid function to check if it is valid, and then it uses a register with the same way to show a message, and the same application, but then it uses the sign up instead of the sign in with an additional value to deal with that. So both screens are the same, it works, and it is. So if we now go here and log in with my demo account, and I'll type the password, sign in. We have no trips. That's the issue that I had in the previous episode, but as you can see, we have the user and we have the notifications. So we're actually moving forward, because now I have the user interface for logging in and registration in SwiftUI. And this is another step forward, because now I can start thinking about implementing sign-in with Apple, because I want to do that in SwiftUI, don't want to investigate in the UIKit anymore. So I have now my login screens done and registration in SwiftUI, and now I'm going to change them or extend them to allow sign in with Apple and maybe even Google. But before we can get there, we need to use the link identities feature from Firebase Authentication. So the first step I will do, but that will be the next episode, is that I'm going to link an Apple ID to this particular user, so that this user can choose to log in with a username and password or sign in with Apple. But that's for the next episode. Now, as you see, I'm on this journey, I make progress, I continue, and if you like it, please like and subscribe. If you want to know what's the next step, also click the notification button, because you get alerted when the next episode is out. And for now, I'll thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.